everyone. Today we have our another new episode. You know that World Talent Economy Forum, we are doing research on Nikola Tesla technologies. We are advancing and uplifting the Nikola Tesla technologies. We are working on this. Those who are interested to publish your research paper on Nikola Tesla, you can submit your research paper in our website, especially your abstract in between 30 March 2023. We will specifically discuss on energy sectors, energy related research of Nikola Tesla. So for today's session, we have our world famous speaker, Madam Ali Rice, Professor Rob, and Professor David Smith. First, I would like to give chance Madam Ali Rice to discuss on advance in Nikola Tesla technology in 21st century. Specifically, we are focusing on energy research.
Okay, so I think essentially that his main kind of goal, Nikola Tesla, was to produce kind of free energy that was available to everyone, that was essentially clean. So I think isn't there myths surrounding whether or not he managed to do that or not? So I think solar energy is definitely kind of working to that kind of advantage, so that when people have solar panels, that they actually get paid by the national grid to have that kind of excess energy brought back. So I think, but I think we've got a long way to go, because I think the corporations that exist, it's in their interest to make profit. So I think that like everything, like the fossil fuel industry, we're kind of all kind of integrated and kind of part of the problem, really. So I think it's going to take quite a long time to change the way things are, particularly in the West. So I think where there's problems with power in kind of third world countries, I think it's an opportunity to kind of seize and find innovation. But I think definitely in the Western world, and even in China, I think they're still kind of reverting back to fossil fuels, aren't they? Instead of, well, I think there's kind of a split in China. So they're kind of innovating, and at the same time they're using fossil fuels too. So yeah, but I definitely think that kind of that clean energy with zero emissions and and something that's sustainable is kind of the way forward. And so when I was researching it, obviously Tesla technology that's involved with Elon Musk is kind of inspired by Tesla, but it's kind of a different thing, really. But I think one of the things that I saw that was amazing is Elon Musk inventing the solar panels that were individual tiles on houses. So I think, and that's kind of way off in the future when it's kind of it's available to everybody. But definitely, I think that's definitely the way forward. And I think electric companies in England, there's quite major players that produce a lot of the energy that they do from solar panels. So yeah, and so where we live, even though England's not particularly known for sunshine, there's big solar farms in this area that cover acres. So I think the thing is, it's even in little old England, we're kind of making changes. And there's several wind turbines locally as well. But I think the thing is that because it's it's an area of outstanding natural beauty, I think there's kind of an argument there. So I think a lot of people worry about having those things on their doorstep. So they're happy they're there if they can't see them. So I think it's a bit of a kind of, yeah, I think it's one of those things that it would be better to embrace it as opposed to, and I've also seen huge wind turbines out it's just off the coast in the UK as well. So I think that's something else that we've definitely pushed forward, because we need to look at alternative ways of producing energy, especially since the fuel crisis here and the war with Ukraine. So everything's kind of incredibly expensive. So yeah, it's definitely something that we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor Rob.
All right, Nikola Tesla. So he was the inventor of AC power. He went to war with Edison, who was the backer of DC power. And many of the things that Ali talked about actually came from Edison's side. The wind generators, for instance, are more connected to what Edison developed than what Tesla developed. Tesla also developed the Tesla coil, which is a fascinating thing to watch as he attempted to figure out ways to broadcast power. On top of the Tesla coil, he invented the magnifying, or at least he conceived of the magnifying transmitter, which is the way to deliver wireless power. He wasn't able to refine it, but today we've got companies like Witricity. Let's see what the hell the other company names, Asia and PowerCast are building on that technology to deliver power wirelessly. And in fact, with regard to short-range wireless power, Witricity has already partially deployed their technology to charge electric cars. Electric cars, of course, are DC power, not AC power. So that's again back to Edison. The Tesla turbine. This is unlike any other turbine that existed. Typical turbines use blades. Tesla's turbine used plates. It had a number of advantages over traditional turbines, but it never really took off. Tesla developed the shadowgraph, which we now call the X-ray machine. The Tesla's was far earlier, but the name probably reflects more of what the device actually does. I actually think shadowgraph's a better name than X-ray, but to look through things, this is what the shadowgraph did. Tesla invented the radio. It actually had a working radio that was better than the radio that was developed in England. Sadly, somehow his lab was burned down. A lot of speculation on who did that, but that allowed the English design to win, and that formed the basis of our current radios. But Tesla's design was better. Had far more range. Tesla is considered the father of the neon lamp, which we use widely, and most of us absolutely hate. One of Tesla's technologies I wish never occurred. Neon lamp light is really not very good for you, and often when we depict corporate hell, it's people working under neon lights, and I tend to agree with that. Tesla is considered one of the fathers of hydroelectric power. He developed the generators that went into Niagara Falls. But a big proponent of that, and of course, hydroelectric power remains one of the greenest ways to generate power today. He also invented the induction motor. And the induction motor is how we run most of our vacuum cleaners, tools, and electric tools and stuff today. So very much well within Tesla's wheelhouse. And then finally, Tesla developed or showcased a first radio-controlled boat, which forms the basis for current drone technology. The drones that recently were used in attack on U.S. servicemen in Syria own their origin to a certain extent to Tesla, as well as the drones that are being used for delivery, and the drones we're using to have an awful lot of fun with as adults and kids all over the place. So Tesla's had a fairly significant impact on the world already. AC is the predominant form of power for homes and industry. DC, of course, is the predominant form of power for propulsion. And really looking at his magnifying transmitter and how companies have now been able to take similar technology and broadcast power across the room. So far, the companies that are doing this, the power broadcasting only going to keep a smartphone charged at its best, but it's designed to power the massive number of IoT devices we're planning and sensors we're starting to deploy all over the world to monitor our environment, to better measure climate change, and to keep people safe. So Tesla's had a major impact. His passing, of course, was a loss to the world, and his treatment was absolutely horrible. But in the end, I think many could argue he's had at least as big an impact as Edison, if not bigger. And those two folks were their rivals, and Edison in that story kind of comes across as a total asshole. So an amazing person that created a number of things. Ironically, he has little to do with the technology in the Tesla car. The Tesla cars are DC power, which would take them back to Edison, which I think would have Tesla rolling over in his grave to know that his arch rival is the one that is the predominant power source in the car that's named after him. So you could certainly argue the wireless capabilities of the car, given his radio background and his remote control efforts, would somehow be connected back through to Tesla. You could argue that he's the father of much of our modern electrical infrastructure, and he died too young. I'll pass over to David.
Thank you. Professor David Smith.
Ali and Rob, you did an excellent job of beginning to summarize a lot of what Tesla did and places he had influence. And what really fascinates me today about Tesla is that his papers are still being studied to this day, and new insights are being derived, not only about the things that he actually invented, but he actually went and wrote about many, many others that have not been invented even still yet as he looks at it. One of the other very interesting factoids on Tesla is he filed 278 patents during a time where you didn't see many people filing patents. And so he was very, very active in doing that. And you begin to see there. And, I love his thoughts. Rob correctly pointed out that Edison had done a lot of things, but one of the real interesting differences is when Edison began to try to commercialize electricity in the Northeast here in the United States. He did it as direct current, where it always flows in one direction and is created by DC generators. And he didn't really understand some of the differences that where Tesla went in and invented the AC and applied that. It allowed the transmission lines to carry power very far from where it's generated, where DC had a distance range. And so that's some of what was developed that let us really take our electricity as we know it today and transmit it at great distances over wires. And the other part is, as Rob had alluded to as well, is Tesla had the dream of doing that wirelessly. And there's many companies, some that Rob mentioned on, some others, like one up here in Dallas, here in Texas, that had begun to doing it. And they began to do it at fairly good distances. The one that I'm familiar with up by Dallas actually has transmitted fairly large amounts of power from just south of Dallas all the way down to Puerto Rico, and has used it there as a power source, and it's been wirelessly transmitted with much less loss than what you see in the normal wires as we understand it today, and how to put that into place, and how to do it. The other really interesting thing is that as I look at what Tesla did, and you saw the differences, was he constantly went back to his inventions and said, what can I do different? How can I improve them? So Rob mentioned the Tesla coil, which is one of my favorite things of his. At many of the South by Southwest here in Austin, there's a company here which has a large entertainment style Tesla coil, and they will set it up on the beaches around Lady Bird Lake here, and they will tie it to music and actually generate a Tesla lightning show using it. And it's neat as entertainment, but it also shows the power of where he was able to think about power and begin to use experiments like that to say, how can I take this electricity? How can I take this power? And how can I deliver it wirelessly without having to go through all the infrastructure hassles that was there? One of the stories that I really enjoy is if you go to New York where the Dodgers baseball team is located, there's a neat story about how when Edison started deploying the DC current there, it was all underground. But because of the spreading popularity, particularly when it began to go AC based on the work that Nikola Tesla was doing actually for Edison, they strung high voltage lines in the air above it. and many of them kept falling and stuff because they did not understand some of the technology yet. And the story is that the Dodgers got their names from dodging those electrical lines that were strung all over that community there. And it's just those type of things that take you back and try to help you understand it. One of the other places that I don't know if Rob mentioned or not is the Tesla turbine. And I know Rob mentioned that he did the hydroelectric power, and with Niagara being one of the instances. But the Tesla turbine is a turbine engine that was bladeless and used smooth rotating discs to generate movement in it, as opposed to the traditional turbines and things and pistons you see in the other engines. It never really caught on, but it was much cheaper and adaptable than to produce the blade turbines, and very, very efficient. Um, you know, the magnifying transmitter was one. That was the other one that is a follow-on work of his Tesla coil technology, and it was fairly large and generated millions of volts of electricity. And one of the instant factoids on it is his magnifying coil actually produced 130-foot long lightning bolts as part of it. And you see that. You see him also being an inventor of the induction motor. And this was a very interesting one. This of inventions. But the ones, and I 1,000% agree with Rob about the neon lights. I think we can call them other names than that, than even the ones he was beginning to refer to. But you just look at the genius of his. He was a true inventor. And if I look at the Nikola Tesla technology and energy, he was all over the board with trying different approaches, different strategies. And to me, that is the sign of a true scientist inventor. He commercialized very few, very, very few, but he continued to invent. And even when he died, people went in and to his where he died, and people stole papers out of it before they were done, to be able to try to take his ideas, his inventions, and continue the commercialization. So as an inventor, he had a profound impact on the world from every different areas, but particularly in the area of energy and power. So Sharif, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, at present, because of COVID and specifically for this war, uh, every country suffering for energy price increasing,
Yeah.
and we need massive change. Even right now, I live in South Asia. We have to change massively the infrastructures and everything because of the war, and we need to prepare the new energy policy. So in that situation, do you believe the different innovation of Tesla can help emerging economy also, because this war also affect the developed nations as well? How it can be helpful, how we should focus on different kind of innovation of Nikola Tesla specifically for the energy sectors, and how it will be implemented the emerging economy.
Well, definitely, I think that the way that he works needs to be applied. But I think it's tricky to bring it to it's pretty to bring it to life without somebody kind of taking responsibility for the humanitarian aspects of things. So I think for me, I think one of the things that's interesting for me is that he was really interested in the kind of the intangible things that we couldn't see. So that like the energy and the frequency and the vibration of things, and I think that I think he kind of turned science on its head. So I think there's one quote that I wrote. Hold on a second. One of the things that he said actually is what we want now is closer contact and better understanding between individuals and communities all over the world, and an elimination of egoism and pride, which was prone to plunge the world into primeval barbarism. And peace can only come as a natural consequence of universal enlightenment. So essentially, we need to share best practice and utilize, ways of doing things, so that we can open it up so everyone has kind of warmth and has the basic kind of things to keep them. Hold on, okay. That I think that's the thing, is that some way we need to share best practice and innovation so that we can help third world countries that aren't in a position to put huge infrastructure in. And I think whether it's solar panels or there needs to be something that kind of is an alternative to supply what they need without huge costs. So I don't know when to, because I think the thing is, for me, what interests me most about Tesla is the way that he thought. So he also thought that the brain was a receiver, and that the universe, there's a kind of a universal intelligence that we can all tap into. And I think for me, that's where it's at, really, that we need to share the knowledge and push the innovation instead of doing things the same way as we always have done, because the Western world and the world at large is kind of geared into either consuming things or profiteering, and it kind of takes most from those that can ill afford it, really. And I think the kind of 1% that have huge amount of money, so I think the thing is that there needs to be a different way of looking at things so that people have quality of life, and that there's that their foundation, the foundation level of the human experience, fulfills those needs, so that there aren't people in survival mode all the time. So I don't know whether I've answered the question, because I don't really understand the technicalities, apart from the fact that I know that there's kind of alternate current or direct current, but I think so I'm probably the wrong person to ask, but I think the theory of kind of sharing knowledge and kind of doing things differently is the only way to overcome the problems that we've got.
Thank you. Professor Rob.
What's your question?
My question is very simple, that in the COVID situations and for this war, every country suffering for this energy price increase, and a lot of suffering, especially country like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Africa, Indonesia, many countries actually suffering. How the Nikola Tesla's innovation can be helpful for this emerging economy, and it's also helpful for the developed nations?
Well, as the father of AC power, he already is helpful to emerging nations. It's undoubtedly how the nations are still powered today. And most countries are powered by AC power. Recognize that much of what Tesla did happened before the 1940s. So we're talking about, even though the guy was amazingly brilliant, I mean, he had a photographic memory. He could think in pictures. He was a polyglot, multilingual, spoke eight languages. By any measure, he was a genius. But he was a genius out of his time. So much of what he was dealing with was the technology that existed prior to the end of the Second World War, and so much has changed since then. I do think, though, for emerging countries, one of the advantages emerging country has is they don't have to replace mid-range technologies. In other words, because they never deployed a lot of the stuff that the developed countries deployed over the last couple of decades, they can leapfrog. That means as we move to broadcast power, they can certainly consider not putting up wires using lower voltage appliances, lower voltage light units, things that fell within the power envelope that companies like Spark Connected, which I think is the company that David Smith was talking about, could handle, and thus avoid the costs of pulling copper, the labor costs of pulling copper, and provide adequate power for low-powered items, and certainly on a limited basis. And also that could inform how they build their cities and structures. More of a hub and spoke design with the power broadcast at the hub, and then the spokes for living, manufacturing, food production, all hovering out in what we call what we often term as narcology. So each structure, each new city is built so it can survive things like earthquakes, so it can survive things that are coming, like conflict, which climate change is already driving, and build for the future that the developed nations are going to have trouble pivoting to, because they'll have to deconstruct an awful lot of things to get there, where the emerging economies can proceed as more of a greenfield, with more of a greenfield kind of advantage. So by thinking strategically and using some of the technologies that Tesla professed, an emerging nation could arguably, for less money, create a far more sustainable, a far more protectable, more secure environment for its citizens. And by doing that, as these different weather events come forward and these different war events occur, they'll be able to survive them better than many of the nations that appear to be in better shape right now. That means, shifting focus from wherever it is to really building for tomorrow. And governments, by and large, just don't do that well. They tend to operate tactically, not strategically. And unless that changes, it's hard for me to imagine the application of something as revolutionary as wireless power and the other things that Tesla professed to be being able to make a difference. Because to make a difference, you really have to make a bet on the future and then invest enough in it to bring that future up to be. And governments have a great deal of difficulty doing that. The kinds of efforts I'm talking about is, for instance, the space effort, the NASA effort that John F. Kennedy in the United States started that continued long after his death and got the US to the moon, and we now use as a basis for the concept of a moonshot. But what I'm talking about here is a moonshot, is a government that is more focused on the health and well-being of its people, and not so focused on its own credit and what it can accomplish in turn, because these kinds of efforts tend to take place over decades. And often that means the people that begin them will not be around, either in government or maybe not even alive when they complete. And that is very hard for people to wrap their heads around. But it is the exact kind of approach we need now, because we're focused on not only saving some countries, we're focused on saving the world. And the only way we're going to do that is that we take a hard look at what the world should look like and then put in the effort to make it so.
Thank you. Professor David Smith.
Oh, Rob, thank you so much. Spark Connect is not the company I was thinking about, but they are one of several in Dallas that are trying to do the same thing. The company I was really thinking about much more is Integrate Energy up there, which is the one who did it. And then there's another one there called Tesla Energy, which is doing a lot of different things too. But there's so many different folks beginning to try to apply his technology in so many different ways that I just love looking at how it's being used and applied. The other place that I think is really important as you look at him is some of his peripheral inventions that were there. And so, for example, one of the other inventions he had was a device which he managed to oscillate, vibrate his laboratory and stuff, and people thought it was an earthquake at the time. And this was a device that had a rotating disc in it and stuff, and it was small enough that he could put in his coat pocket. And he went out to the Wall Street district and found a steel framework of a building that was being built with nothing else in it, and put it on, and just a few minutes later the whole building was creaking and waving and stuff. And this earthquake generator, as he began to think it was there, but what this ended up being used later on is this was the beginning of a device to generate seismic waves generated by it to help understand earthquakes and be able to detect earthquakes and stuff. And it's the same concept he used as he looked at the Tesla coil, the Tesla generators, all of this was the concept of pulses of energy that could be used and how it could be applied to the other technologies and the other things. One of his other inventions, which never was there, but it was one which I thought it would be great fun to see, and he never succeeded in bringing his theory to reality, was he announced what he called a thought camera, and it was made a device which he wanted to photograph the human mind. And he theorized that any thought in the human brain forms an image in the retina that can be captured and analyzed. And what's very interesting, though, is today scientists have begun to invent an artificial retina and using it to begin to send waves not from the brain to it, but from it to the brain. So you're seeing those type of things still beginning to be done today. And, you know, you can just go and find so many interesting things about him. His death, the fact that during most of his life, his research was not funded. And he scraped by doing his research while doing other activities as well. You know, so I often think, what would his inventions be? What would his commercialization capabilities be if he had money provided to support his research and begin to apply it? Plus, if he had collaborators. Now, we talked today a lot about the concept of group intelligence and how could that be able today to help them be more of the inventor and have other people help commercialize what he was doing. And I just love the fact that one person could have the imagination and the science mind to invent in so many vastly different fields and begin to take things that were developed for one, using my terms today, vertical industry, and begin to deploy those in so many different industries as he took his inventions and theorized, for the most part, how they could be used in other ones. And it's his power of connecting dots that, to me, sets part of the legacy of Nikola Tesla in place. And even Rob mentioned that not being really associated with Tesla automobiles, but Elon Musk has actually said that he has copied Nikola Tesla innovation process and that he's applying it across his companies, from the automobile company to the SpaceX to the Boring company to the neurological company and others. And it's that innovation process which I personally would like to see us go back and try to spread his innovation process even further today, because I believe there's merit to it. And the fact that he was not, he did not penalize himself for failure. He learned from everything he did that was not successful, and he continued to work on it and adapt it until he saw more positive results. And that's one of the spirits of invention that we really need to duplicate and use today. So, Sharif, thank you, and I guess back to you.
Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, research and innovation is our key to solve social problem. So in the emerging economy, we are focusing on that particular area. Nikola Tesla will be our inspiration, how a scientist can contribute for solving many problems. So what do you think? How we can enhance the capacity as a researcher, as an innovator?
Because ultimately we need to look at where we are now and figure out where those problems are, and then then figure out solutions so that there's more access to people. And I just think that at the moment we're kind of at a sticking point because, well, from what I can see, it's like kind of cars at the moment. Sorry, I just need to quickly go and let my dog in before she. Oh crap! Sorry. So essentially, it's like here. I think the petrol crisis and the war in Ukraine is pushing people to suddenly think that the petrol prices have gone up so much, it makes more sense to get an electric car. So, and I think the thing is that electric cars, if you look at all the details, they're not the way that they're manufactured. It's not environmentally conscious from all kinds of things that put the car together, the way they find the raw materials and whatever. But the thing is, in the long run, it's a better solution than what we've got now. And it feels like at the moment, to me anyway, that we're getting pushed to a situation that we're going to have to change because the long-term kind of agenda is that we need to change because we're not sustainable. And it's the same with the education system, the health system, it's kind of, and prior to 2020, we also weren't sustainable. Those systems weren't working. So I think the thing is, and I don't think the West has got it right. And I think what frustrates me, and I've always said it, because I spent quite a lot of time in Malaysia 20 years ago. And I think the thing is that what frustrates me is third world countries, in inverted commas, are in a prime position to do things differently and innovate instead of making the mistakes that we've done. And I don't understand why people would keep going down the same road, apart from the fact, because my sister's husband is a chemical engineer, and he worked in Malaysia because he built and ran a plant there as well. And I think one of the things that happens is that West takes over all their industrial processes and kind of makes them do what we do because it's profitable for them and it brings jobs to the East. And it's kind of, so then there's kind of this vicious circle that they're pushed into doing things the same way instead of innovating. And I think the thing is that the innovations where so I think the thing is that the strength is in the innovation. And the best way to do that is look at people that weren't afraid to do things differently and wanted to make things accessible, and weren't profiteering. They were doing it so that most people could have it impacted the most people in the most effective way. And I think education's like that, that we need to educate our young people so that they get the greatest opportunity. But that's the thing is, but here in the UK, we all move to different areas to get to the best schools. And essentially, when I was growing up, that's not, so I think it's, so I think we need to look at the way things are and kind of just alter the whole way that we're doing things so that, innovation's kind of key. But I think it still starts from, from home, and our own life experience is determined by what we've experienced from our early years to now. And and if we've got children, their experience of school is a whole different ball game to now. But the fact that they've got information at their fingertips is incredible. So I think the thing is that puts a whole new complexion on things. And I think for me, the creative process, whether you're an artist or a scientist, that it's kind of the same thing. And creative processes engage and inspire people. So I think it's kind of doing things differently because that there's other solutions instead of just doing what we've always done. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Professor Rob, you work for different big corporations, specifically in Silicon Valley and USA. So how they invest in research and innovation, because we are connecting government agency and corporation from emerging economy. What do you think? Research and innovation will be helpful for developing new products?
Well, so each of the large companies have a investment arm. That investment arm is tasked with going out and looking at the market for potential emerging competitors, potential emerging partners, or for technologies that could impact them favorably or unfavorably in the future, and finding ways to turn whatever threats they represent into potential future advantages. They're very focused on things that are connected back into building the company. Often these venture investments create competitive groups outside the company that keep the groups inside the company focused. Often they can result in future acquisitions by the company as that technology develops. They'll acquire the younger firm, and sometimes they'll integrate it. Sometimes they might even shut it down. Sometimes they'll only pull in the intellectual property the firm has developed. So there are a lot of dangers in working with these groups. One, you have to kind of understand how they operate, and you have to have your own goals in mind. If you're only in this for the money, then it really doesn't matter what these firms want to do with your technology if they acquire it. But if you've got involved in this to make a difference and because you wanted your vision to carry forward, I'll recognize that when you get involved with a larger firm, whatever that vision is undoubtedly going to be subordinated to the firm's vision for the future. There is as I say, a substantial amount of danger when working with a larger firm. I'll give you some examples with regard to Microsoft, because I ran into this a bunch of times myself. Often what would happen with Microsoft, and how Microsoft got a really bad reputation in the 90s, was people would go in with the idea that they could get access to Microsoft's deep pockets by convincing them to invest in their firm, or maybe even buying them. And what often happened is they'd have the meeting, nothing would happen for a few months, and then suddenly Microsoft would announce an effort that looked an awful lot like what was presented to them. And the end result was that the folks lost their technology. Now, Microsoft would defend and say, hey, they were already developing something like this inside the company. And somehow my phones have decided to auto-operate. Who knows where that's even coming from in my office. Isn't technology wonderful? So care needs to be taken with regard to working with a larger firm. You really need to know what their motivations are, what their past behavior is, and step in with every caution.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. What is your advice? How we can improve the quality of research and innovation, and how we should invest more in that particular area, because what is the benefit of research and innovation?
Dr. Sharif, you're in an area that I have devoted a lot of my life to, particularly at consortia like the MCC consortia and the Sematech consortia and others, in that you have to begin and look and see at how you get people to collaborate with each other, how you get group intelligence to work, and those other elements. What is interesting is I go back to Nikola Tesla to answer your question. He wrote a very interesting paper once, and I have it on my computer. Let me quote you part of it. This is his method for innovation. My method is different. I do not rush into actual work. When I get an idea, I start at once building it up in my imagination. I change the construction, make improvements, and operate the device in my mind. It's absolutely immaterial to me whether I, for example, run my turbine in thought or test it in his lab. I even note if it's out of balance. There's no differences whatsoever in the way I get the results. They're the same. And he goes on and puts it on further pieces on that. And then he says, after I can see and get it to work in my brain, I put it in concrete form, this final product of my brain. And invariably, my device works as I conceived it should in the experiment that comes out that way. So in some ways, what he was proposing is, in his mind, he was able to do some of the complex modeling and things that we do with our computers today. And increasingly in the innovation processes, we're able to model that very rapidly. We're able to go through and optimize the innovations, the things that we are working on by using our digital tools today, where he had to do that all in his mind. And I think that and the ability to model and to rapidly integrate and go through many, many different models as we begin to test and refine what we're going to do, Sharif, is part of what will change the way we are innovating today. I think if I look globally to answer your question, um, a lot of the last decade to me has been about industries from like the healthcare industry through manufacturing, through many of the different others, uh, asking themselves, how can I interoperate with others? I've got all this data. You know, data is doubling every 2 years. And with the Internet of Things, the Internet of Medical Things, and other, that pace of data growth is going to increase. So they're going to have all this data. How do I get it work to my other systems and things? What I think the next big thing we're going to see is not about the interoperability, but I think it's going to be about the speed of innovation. And things like what is talked about often on your programs by Rob, me, and others is the concept of the digital twin, the concept of being able to rapidly model, to be able to see things not just in the one vertical domain, but many different domains at the same time, and be able to take principles that work in one domain, and particularly through our ability to model, put them in other domains and see how they work there. I think the speed of innovation using those approaches is going to be the next big breakthrough that will drive not only research and development, but I think it's going to drive many industries. Uh, I think speed of innovation is going to be the next big thing you see in healthcare, for example, as we move from interoperability there to speed of innovation. And I see that in many areas. And what I love about that, Dr. Shree, is that speed of innovation is a pretty flat playing field. It can happen in a developing nation. It can happen in a developed nation. It can happen in large corporate research labs, but it also can happen in the garage shops of people inventing. And you know, many of today's largest companies began out that simple, with people in a facility, in a garage, coming together to invent and to share the group intelligence to move things forward, to create products and create companies. I think we're going back to those times again to see that this rapid speed of innovation is going to be one of the next key points that we have in the world today. And I think, Sharif, that is where the R&D process is going to advance itself again, refine itself again, and really research to me knows no geography. It's where the best competencies, capabilities, and imagination come together. And that's where great things happen. So thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, what's your thought?
I think for me, the quote that always reminds me of Tesla is, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And I think definitely in my experience since 2020, I've realized how I can access kind of my intuition. So I think it goes back to Einstein's thing about intuition, and it's kind of that the education system kind of almost doesn't recognize we have intuition, and we're kind of encouraged to be servants of what is, as opposed to realize what could be. And I think that kind of, and also interestingly, somebody that I know is a doctor of, she's a doctor of psychology. She's got a PhD, but she does sound birth healing and things like that. And I think it's really extraordinary that there's alternative ways of doing things that don't require physical intervention. And I think mental health and, you know, the kind of energetic, you know, essentially, I think from my experience, to be honest, that when the body goes wrong, it's usually because there's blockages, and if things flow through, you know. So I think kind of keeping healthy is about keeping open, and I think that's just as being open-minded and hearted and sharing knowledge and kind of, so I think that kind of, that openness to share and innovate, so that, it's also because we're so connected across the world, that making those connections so that we can make, the world all benefit from something, as opposed to just kind of, doing it on your own home turf. So I think the thing is, just sharing best practice in whatever field it is the way forward, and kind of co-collaborating, co-creating, so you get the people that are innovating joining together, so that it just accelerates the process. And I think one of the things actually during the quotes that I wrote down, actually, I think he was talking about how the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries. And definitely when we got locked down, we pushed the education process 10 years ahead of where it should be online, because we were forced to. So I think the thing is that sometimes we're kind of, it's when we're forced into a situation, so we have to find a solution that we do. So yeah, so maybe it's because we're kind of hitting, the climate change and all of the kind of problems that we're up against, that humans are very good at finding solutions when they have to. So and it's a shame that sometimes we're pushed to when it's almost on the brink that we have to do something. So yeah, but no, I think the kind of power of imagination and creativity and innovation is incredible, and that's kind of what's going to get us through. And it could be through entrepreneurs as opposed to big corporates, as to where we, as to where we make the breakthroughs. And our young people are incredibly innovative. So it might be kind of some young person somewhere that kind of discovers something that's extraordinary, that so yeah, it can be anywhere, but I think the potential's there. We just need to tap into it.
Thank you. Professor Rob, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, remember, emerging economies have a couple of advantages. One is low labor costs. Another one is they can leapfrog technologies. And a third is that they often can be more focused on the things that other larger countries aren't focused on, like securing the very basics for their population. Those advantages can be used in their strategies, but in working with larger firms or other countries, they have to do so with their eyes open and be aware of the motivations for those entities, so they can protect themselves in the process. So so finding a way to use their advantages successfully, much like Singapore did, much like Japan did after the Second World War, or even China did after the Second World War, to leapfrog other countries is really what emerging countries need to be looking at. That means they need to think strategically, and the kinds of tools they can now get access to do that. Things like generative AI, low-cost supercomputers are now available to them. Things that just a few years ago were so expensive, even developed countries had trouble funding them. Now you can buy the technology for what amounts to less than what would cost you to buy an automobile. So in the end, by looking to the future and by being aware of the fact they don't need to follow the emerged economies path, but they can leapfrog and move ahead, go to where the mature economies already are focused on but can't get to, is the way to progress in this world. And you only get there by having your eyes open and focusing on getting the experience you need in the decision makers, so they know what they're dealing with and can make the appropriate decisions timely. And finally, of course, they have to operate strategically. If you're operating tactically, you're always putting out small fires and you never make progress. They have to make the investment to jump ahead and actually address the overall problem. And they have the potential to get to the goal that the developed countries are going for, but get to it first, because they don't have to follow the same path.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your today's session?
I love the sage advice from the other two panelists. It is a great model for people to follow. My advice is pretty straightforward, is that as you look at places where you can innovate, understanding innovations come from all places and can be applied in many different places. I think that is one of the legacies we see from Nikola Tesla is he identified himself in many, many different industries. Um, and I believe that's something that we need to practice. Also, you look at the education. He advanced science in many areas which he was not educated in. And we can do that as well today with what we have. I do want to encourage people to understand that the definition of geography has changed. Geography is not necessarily a place on a map. Geography is where you can find the competencies and capabilities to do what you want to do. And that is so true as we look at research and development. You can go and pull those resources, pull the elements almost any place in the world to help you advance. And the amount of knowledge that is and data that is on the internet today boggles my mind from me trying to think about what I did decades and decades ago before the internet. And that we have very few excuses for not trying to innovate and move ourselves ahead. But more than anything else, Sharif, I think programs like yours are prime examples of what we have to do as we look at governments trying to help innovation, as we look at universities and colleges, as we look at not just large companies, but what can small startups do? What can an individual entrepreneur do to innovate, to prepare innovations to go to market and to sell and get revenue and grow and create a difference and impact economic development and create jobs and new basis. That is what this is all about. And I think your example of using Nikola Tesla as part of his process to do it is a great place to help stir the minds of young entrepreneurs, to help stir the minds of politicians and bureaucrats, to help us return to the age of great inventions again, and to be able to do that. And I see we're headed in that direction. And I believe, Sharif, programs like yours will help us achieve that going forward. So thank you so much for letting me be parts of your programs over the years.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session. We have a very important conference in July. We are uplifting Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. And besides important conference in India, around 1,500 tech companies they are joining this conference. Different government agencies like business ministry, energy ministry, and the engineering ministries from India they are joining. They are supporting. They are joining in this conference from South Asia to uplifting the community and collaborate with all of the high quality innovations. So our dialogue become action when we actually help the emerging economy. So hopefully all of the speakers, those who continuously support World Talent Economy Forum, they can help us to grow the emerging economy, as well as they can share their knowledge, views, and opportunity for all of the people from emerging economy. Thank you, Professor David Smith, for your excellent contribution for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you, Madam Ali Rice, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum, as well as I want to give thanks Mr. Rob for his support from day one. Beside that, I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. And those who join in our dialogue, everybody is influential. You have your network, you have your friends from government agency, corporation, and academy. You can share World Talent Economy Forum projects. So hopefully we can collaborate more and we can solve more complex problem together. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you all.